Morning. Thanks for coming. This is going to be fun. Definitely a little bit experimental. Okay, a lot experimental, to be honest. Um, as I had mentioned, I had participated in HandmadeCon, and I thought that experience was really cool, and interesting. I thought from an audience point of view and from my point of view when I was watching other people do it, and it was all completely ad hoc, right? It was sort of just a discussion and an interview, and I thought that I think would be a great opportunity for our team as well. So that led to today. Um, what I'd like to do is hand it over. So anyway, welcome everybody. I'd like to hand it over to Ryan, who has a couple of words.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is really special for us and who we are as a studio. We really like to focus on collaboration and teamwork and sharing, and that's what today is all about. It's just about giving back to the development community and hearing from you as fellow developers and seeing how we can improve our collective craft. So thank you for taking time to come, and especially giving up part of your weekend as well. And it's inspiring for me to see people who want to improve themselves no matter what. And again, thank you.
All right, so I wanted to come to talk about some of the questions that have come up so far. Let's just get started. So some of the things from a high level that I thought some people might be interested in hearing. How do you divide up your team? Certainly a thing that would be interesting to me to hear about other people's teams. So what we have in our core team, on our engine team, is 4 groups. We have the render team, which in each group is about, say, between roughly 4 or 5 people. We have the render team, who is probably the most appropriately named group and does mostly rendering, although all of our groups are gray and overlapping, and nothing is strictly set in stone. We have the animation group, which does, in fact, do and mostly and much of the animation work, but also does cinematics and audio and physics. We have the syndicate group, which tends towards the tools work and infrastructure work. And we have the support group, which is an internal tools and engine QA group, which I think is relatively new for us over the last 2 or 3 years. Dave, right? And it's basically the idea was that we take the same investment that we would put into QA on our games and really apply that to our internal tools and engine as well. And so have dedicated people on QA for our tools. So that's basically our engine team. Another question was, how do you train? So I think that the constant struggle with most teams is, there's this sort of desire to do formal training, external courses, bringing in internal courses, that sort of thing. And our experience has been mixed with that kind of thing. We have occasionally brought in an external course, and I'm not sure that has been really valuable. We have occasionally sent people to an external course for various things. Again, that's really getting the value out of that, especially across the whole team, is really hard. Things like GDC, those kind of things are obvious. Most of the value from those comes from in just meeting everybody together, kind of like hopefully today. So we concentrate, I think, mostly on the day-to-day kind of training. We try to look for where people have an opportunity to grow and arrange things in such a way that that's what they're working on as often as we can. We think about that the best person to do a job might not be the right person to do the job. So if somebody's particularly skilled in a particular area or has done it before, that's especially good reason for them not to do it again. To find somebody else that can do it and they can just mentor them through the process. So that sort of on-the-job kind of training tends to be where our focus is. For our associates and certainly for new hires, our training process is a little bit different. We tend, at least at the very beginning, to sort of throw them around the whole team, so have them sit with each group and sit with each person and work on problems across the whole team and in different groups, regardless of what group that they're in. So they get a sort of a taste of the whole engine. we tend to give them feed from the bug lists. So here's some small bugs that you can fix, so they can sort of mentor them through that process. And that goes on as long as it needs to go on until we're sort of everybody's confident and comfortable that they can actually do something without burning down the whole company. Let's see. How do you keep everyone moving in the same direction? And I think this is tricky, right? I mean, I think for any team, this is going to be tricky. At one point, on one hand, you want everyone to be a little bit autonomous, right? You want people to make their own decisions. You want people to push for the things that are important to them. On the other hand, you don't want everybody spread across and doing different things and fighting against each other. And you want to get some efficiencies out of having a team working together. So I think the practice of this really is part of it is our group structure. And that each of these groups are responsible for their areas as a group. So they're responsible within that group for communicating together. So figuring out how to communicate amongst those 4 or 5 peoples. So we're not saying one individual is responsible for this one task, but in fact, this whole group is responsible, and the division of labor is up to the group and how they do that. So that helps to keep at least that 4 or 5 people moving in the same direction, because they know that all those responsibilities are shared. Other than that, it's mostly about communication, constant communication. I'm talking to the leads all the time. We have one-on-ones with everyone on the team at least once, or approximately once every 2 weeks. So I will have a one-on-one with everyone on the team. Their lead will also have a one-on-one with them. So most people have a one-on-one at least twice every 2 weeks, which I think for some seems like a lot of talking. But I think for us is sort of a really critical part of the process, and not just in terms of what direction we're going and what we're working on, but in terms of sort of hearing any issues that come up as soon as possible. So anybody's having any struggles, anybody's having something happened where they were uncomfortable or something was difficult, that they have a chance to talk about that as soon as possible, and that doesn't wait. Okay, here's a good one. How do you judge ROI? So return on investment on a feature. So we're looking, you're trying to judge feature or usability request or bug fix even, right? So how do you decide if it's the right thing to do? Because inevitably there's a lot more work than there is people and time to do it in, especially for any given game. So you have to pick the things that you think are the most valuable. I think for usability features, we have rules of thumb that we use or try to apply. So for me, that rule of thumb is about 5 times benefit. So in terms of the time it takes us to develop the feature, I want to see about 5 times benefit in terms of production time. So if it takes us 2 weeks to develop some kind of tool, I want to see 10 weeks saved in production overall. Which, if it's 2 weeks to develop a tool and there are 100 people using it, it should, and they each save, an hour, we're pretty good, right, in terms of time there. So it's about total production time saved. In terms of some certain features within the game, that's also really hard, because sometimes it's about barrier of entry and not specifically return on investment and usability. Right, so it's, how much is this special effect worth, or how much is this anti-aliasing worth, right? Those are hard things to judge. So we just have to look at what we believe are the expectations of the players, what barriers we want to push as a team, and make those judgments in terms of what we want to accomplish, as opposed to what we think the return is going to be. I wanted to introduce Ted Price, who was not able to come today. All right, Ted, thanks for joining us here at Core Dump. Can you share with the audience a little bit about why you thought this was a good idea?
Well, we've had a history of sharing with the rest of the industry. I mean, from the very early days, we were sharing with our buddies Naughty Dog when we used to be in a bungalow right next door on the Universal Studios campus. And I think our desire to just feel that we can give back to the industry has just grown over the years. And I think your efforts here with Core in general have prove that there's a desire for sharing that information and understanding how all developers tackle similar challenges in different ways.
So going back to those moments where sharing really worked with other studios, what I imagine didn't happen was in order to really share, in order to really communicate what you wanted to accomplish, you didn't stand up in front of a podium and speak for an hour on a specific problem and give a specific solution, right? That's probably not how it went down. When were the moments when you were able to share? Like what defined those moments for you?
They were sharing on a sort of a personal basis. For example, I'd call up Jason Rubin and we talk about different approaches that we were using to run our companies. Or we would go over to Naughty Dog and talk to some of their core engineers or project managers, or they come over here to Insomniac and we just talk about processes. But then we would, and you've seen this happen and you've been part of it, we get up on stage and we do share with the world when it comes to our culture and philosophies, our processes, how we tackle certain, say, programming challenges, how we tackle design challenges. And then there's the sort of the online presence that we have, where we have the R&D page, and we have people from all over the company writing up just their approaches to solving the traditional problems in development.
So is there something that you haven't shared, maybe, that you found over the years to be surprisingly complicated as part of running a studio, as part of making games, something that's just really, that other people think should be easy?
I think choosing your projects is something we really don't talk about very often, and why we decide to, say, do a game for the Oculus Rift, or work on a multi-platform game with GameStop, or, say, choose a giant budget versus a small budget. I think most people assume that developers have a method, maybe a particularly strict method for deciding what kind of games they're going to do. At Insomniac, we've really never had a method, and it sounds bad, maybe, to some, but we tend to look ahead and try to decide which audience can we address with what we want to say. You know, what's that audience going to be? And for recently, just to use Oculus as an example, we're pretty excited about VR, right? And saw an opportunity to get in on a new technology and talk to a brand new audience that we've never really directly addressed before, was something we thought was very cool.
So if something were to exist to make that process of deciding easier, either information or tools or anything, what would that be?
I think hearing even more from our fans and our community about what it is that they're playing today, what they like to play, what they think we should be doing. Now, we get that sometimes in the forums, but we get it in a very sort of targeted way, because we have a lot of fans who have followed Ratchet and Resistance and Sunset Overdrive over the years, and a lot of people would like us to make more games like that. But if there was a way to reach out to a broader audience and people who maybe don't play Insomniac games and have them opine on where they think we're strong and where they believe we could, say, tell new stories or address a new segment of gamers, that'd be awesome.
I think community is one of those areas that's also surprisingly complicated, that I think people think should be easy.
Yeah. Well, everybody's different, right? I mean, that's the biggest challenge with community. Everybody has a different opinion. And when we're, say, talking to our community and listening and reading responses, it sometimes is very difficult to draw consistent conclusions, because there are so many different things that people like. Types of games, types of stories, type of characters. Yeah, it never ends. And the challenge for us is sort of to sift through all the responses and find common threads that sort of match our own passions here at Insomniac.
So, in terms of community reach out, not just Insomniac, but looking at what other studios do and the places that are normally reached out to, say forums and social media and places like that. How much of that is really addressing the general audience, do you think? Or do you think there's a significant portion of the audience that just is never heard from?
I think you're right. I think there's a silent majority of gamers out there who maybe don't check in with their favorite developers, community forums, who don't express their opinions on Reddit, who don't get onto Twitch and watch streams. And that's okay. I mean, I think that's sort of always been the way. We tend to hear from the vocal minority. Is that and certainly we are appreciative of what we hear from the vocal minority, but I think there's always an opportunity to bring more people into the general gaming community, not just Insomniac's community, but just that bring into that larger conversation.
So I know that some people would say that metrics would try to capture some of that information on the sort of silent majority, but do you think metrics really capture the heart of what you want, or is it something else?
Well, I think there's a technical challenge there in that there's no consistent way to capture those metrics. If, for example, if we are tracking statistics in our game, it's just one game. Maybe we have the same method for all of our games, but again, that's just a small number of games in this giant pool of games that players are engaging in every year. And when it comes to sharing, for example, you asked what are some things that we don't typically share. Well, we don't share those statistics with other developers. It'd be a great opportunity to have developers come together and say, okay, hey, look, this is what our players experienced in our last game. What did you guys see? Did they find your game too difficult as well? Did you find that most of your players fell off at about 3/4 of the way through? And then talk openly about why that might have happened. And that's a really good opportunity. But until we have that open dialogue and until we have a consistent method of collecting those statistics, it probably is something that has to be done on an ad hoc basis.
Do you think there's something, you think it's cultural, or do you think there's something specific that's inhibiting developers from sharing that kind of information?
I frankly think it's because we're all really busy. I mean, you know what it's like when you're working hard to meet deadlines and you've got a ship date and you want to make the best possible game you can, your focus is generally squarely on that. And for independent developers in particular, we run lean, right? We don't have a giant management structure. We're all participating in making the games. So it's difficult to sort of step outside of that and make the time to set it up. We do. I mean, for example, CoreDup is a great example of us stepping outside of the day-to-day game development process and going, well, what could we do that would help the industry? What could we do to sort of that's unusual and helps everybody?
Well, I don't want to hold you for too long. So do you have any final words for our audience over the next 2 days of CoreDup?
I'd participate. Speak up. That's what we say here at Insomniac. If you have ideas, speak up, share, help all of us together come up with creative solutions to the challenges that every single one of us faces in this industry.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions from last night that came in last night that I'd like to address too. One is, how do we get games done 10 times faster? Right, you guys laugh, but I think the challenge with this question is that, one, we can, right? There are clearly people who are getting games done really super fast, right? People getting games out once a week. There are people getting games done in a weekend, in a game jam, right? People are getting games done, not just 10 times faster, multiple orders of magnitude faster than we're getting done, right? It's a question of what kind of game you want and how, what kind of investment are you putting in it. So I think, the question is really, I think the heart of the question is, how do we do what we're doing today 10 times faster so that we can make room for what we're going to be doing tomorrow? And I think the challenge with that is sort of the heart of the engine and the tools, the stuff that we work on is that sort of efficiency model, right? How do we get way more efficient at what we're doing? And I think to a large degree we are 10 times better than we were, say, 10 years ago. We can do easily 10 times as much work in the same amount of time. And part of that is the focus on usability and efficiency in our tools and in our processes, right, as a team. But what are the sort of the big opportunities for taking another giant leap? I mean, I think there are things we can look at in our pipeline, and everybody's pipeline that are bottlenecks, right? Along with sort of classic bottlenecks like lighting, there's stuff like UVs, right? I mean, I think UVs, just the fact that they're in the pipeline at all, slow the whole thing down, right? I mean, from the modeling and texturing side, all the way through the whole pipeline, and the fact that if anything on that needs to change, it has to go sort of all the way back to the beginning. So looking toward the future and how we can sort of unravel that I think could make a big dent in the overall pipeline length. And of course, there is sort of the dream of procedural generation of all the things. And I think that there's some wins there for sure. Certainly on our team, we're doing a lot of procedural generation, and the artists are doing a lot of procedural generation of both textures and shaders and geometry. That's all part of their pipeline, right? But you can look at games like No Man's Sky and say, well, procedural generation, all the things, right? Just everything, and that's I think suitable for some set of games and not others. Others you want that sort of handcrafted feel. You just have to make it more efficient, right? So I don't know that we really have an answer for what's sort of the future of procedural generation in the sense that it's still handcrafted and it still gives you what you want there. But I think making it's sort of continuing along the same lines. Tools like Houdini or whatever, so that you have some group of people who are building custom tools that then procedurally generate stuff, and procedurally generating suites of shaders and things like that. So more in that direction. But I think being able to describe things at a higher level is still going to be the place that we're going to be attacking, right? Whatever the problem is, right? Whether it's a design challenge or an art challenge, how do you describe it at one higher level, right? How do you describe what it is they want to accomplish rather than all the little intricacies of using the tool, right? So I think that's really the goal and where we want to go. So I think a related question was, where does all the time in game development go? And I think again, I think the heart of this is not like it's not how why are you lazy devs taking so long to make these games? I don't think that's the heart of it. I think it's really about where are opportunities for efficiency improvement, right? Where are our opportunities for looking at big usability problems and where they can be improved and how we can shorten down those pipelines and dependencies between teams and things like that. And I think that it's sort of not surprising from our point of view where a lot of the time goes, right? Environment creation is a huge amount of the time. You have large open world environments. The creation of those environments takes a long time. And not just like sort of the rough creation. I mean, the rough creation can be done in a very short amount of time. You can probably pull up a rough in a day or a week or however long it takes you to decide. The decision that it maps to what you want is the longest thing there. It's all the detail, right? It's all the custom work. It's all making it feel like the real world and feel like the things that you want to accomplish and all the changes that you make in the iterations and people painting custom signs and, people moving things around and doing design tests and figuring out what things actually work and then adjusting the world to fit. It's all the iteration that takes the time, right? Which is where you want it to be. You want the iteration, right? You want people to be spending time figuring out whether or not things work. But I think there's definitely opportunities for improvement. I mean, from my point of view, one of the interesting things in terms of improving usability, and that's been our focuses for say the last 8 years, is the discovery that sometimes it's not everybody's happy with things being faster. So the point of usability is that you can get in more iterations, right? You have more efficient models, so people can get more iterations, so that you can get to a better result faster. But of course, that means you are in fact making bigger changes more often. You're making bigger changes later. So the impact on the rest of your pipeline is even bigger, right? So you have a designer who, because he can iterate quickly and because he can move a bunch of stuff and change parts of the level right up until the last minute, right, can impact everyone, right? And say, oh, I'm just going to change this level 2 weeks before this demo, right? And everybody has to adjust. So that's sort of the downside, I think, to a quick iteration, right? Is that everyone has to be on top of all those changes all the time. And so policies and procedures become much more important. Organization becomes much more important because your bottleneck is not your tools at that point. Your bottleneck is your process and what makes sense and what's sensible for your team, right? And I think that's something that for us is something that we've been discovering over the last couple of games is that process and that discipline and that organization has become much, much more important to us than the actual model of efficiency, the actual tools, which were definitely the bottleneck previously. So on that note, I'd like to get straight into our first interview.